Okay, next up is me. I'm going to talk briefly about UKNOF status. This is something we try and do once a year, just to make sure that everybody knows what's going on behind the curtain and keeping the activities in touch with the community. Sorry, excuse me. So this presentation is essentially the same as we will give at the AGM on Thursday. The AGM is open to members of the advisory committee and the board, but there's no reason for us not to share all the information with the community. UKNOF has no secrets. We run as transparently as possible. So where are we at? Well, we're 28 and a half meetings in. We started with 40 attendees. At our last meeting, we had 270 in Reading, which is a record. Mailing list is now over 1,100 people. We have a whole bunch of committees to run things. There's a program committee, advisory committee, a board, a meeting committee, and quite a crowd of regular volunteers as well. And we're in pretty good shape financially. For those of you who are not familiar with the UKNOF Charter, I could read it out to you, or I could say, well, basically what we're here to do is distribution of clue. It seems to me that the demand for understanding of best practice on internet operations has shot up significantly over the past 2 or 3 years. And I like to think that UKNOF has played a role in helping that. What do? We do pretty much what we've always been doing, 3 meetings a year, keeping it relevant, keeping it interesting, spreading knowledge, bringing in speakers from international meetings to the UK, where many of the people who are within the UK community may not be able to get out and learn that. It's about being open, about bringing in new blood, not just the usual suspects, and it's also about free-ranging. We don't have infrastructure to run that we're responsible for, which means that we can have a much wider remit than the many of the other internet bodies that exist out there. We run a bunch of the usual means for communicating. I mentioned the mailing list. There's a LinkedIn group. There's presence on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Most of that is announcements, although there's been some pretty interesting discussions on the mailing list recently. We set up a remit for the meetings that 3 times a year we would do at least 1 a year in London and at least 1 a year outside of London. Slightly loose definition of London over the past year, but we're managing to keep to that. We aim for the 3rd Thursday in every January, April, and September. We generally manage to stick to the months, but exactly which days kind of depends on venue availability and avoiding clashing with meetings, and also trying not to have meetings too soon after long holiday periods. We're always on the lookout for venues and sponsors, so we try and plan at least a year out now, and as the meetings get bigger, we need to plan that further out. So here's meeting attendance. It's been growing very steadily over the past year. Obviously, number 29 looks like it's small, but you'll see that there are smaller meetings in there, which are when we tend to go to the less obvious locations, and this is actually our biggest regional meeting outside of the larger cities. It's really good to see a meeting in Belfast that's 3 times the size of one of our first ever meetings in London. We run various bits of mostly virtual infrastructure. We're grateful to Bytemark, who provide a number of virtual machines for Indico Wiki. There's still some legacy stuff on one of my servers, but Jump have donated a VM for that, and I'm in the process of migrating to it. LANAP provide the mailing list VM. We have a video archive of most of the videos in recent UKNOF meetings on YouTube. And then there are various other bits of glue, video conferencing and voice conferencing facilities, phone lines, and the webcast archive and meeting archive. What is the funding model? We're essentially a non-profit organization. From the start, we've tried to avoid meeting registration fees. We think that's very important, lowering the barrier to entry for who can participate, and we've done that through meetings sponsors. We've had good support of many vendors, many of whom come back, many of whom are very generous in their support. All they ask for is a few minutes of your time and attention. And we like to stick with that model. We really don't want to have to start charging registrations. The only place, we experimented a little bit around charging registrations, but the policy that we have now is the only place that we charge registration is for late registration. So if you don't sign up 2 weeks or more before the meeting, then there is a nominal charge towards our costs, and that's really just to help us plan. We have a reasonable operating cash buffer. We had a cash buffer of about 2 meetings worth last year. That's slightly down this year, but we're still in good shape. We decided over 2012 and 2013 that we needed to make some changes to the organisation and came up with a development strategy to scale things and make it more professional. That was about removing a number of barriers to basically make sure that we could have the meeting. We weren't turning people away, that we didn't have to operate standby lists because the venue wasn't big enough, and make sure that we didn't leave any sponsorship opportunities on the table because it was too complicated to sign up more than a couple of sponsors per meeting. So I think we've succeeded in terms of having a more professional and scalable organisation. We have made much more aggressive use of team collaboration tools that work in the cloud, and moved away from being reliant on particular individuals as a single point of failure. And the flip side of that is that when you go above a certain size of venue, you have to pay for it. There's a higher cost per head. Keeping it free means that to cover these higher costs, you need to raise the sponsorship. If you're going to take more sponsorship money from sponsors, you have to be more professional about it and dedicate more time to it. That's worked. We're in a virtuous circle there, and we have been raising more money and raising the standard and increasing the size of the meetings. What's it cost us per meeting? A lot more than it used to. Typically about £25,000 to £35,000 per meeting. Depending on where we are, it can cost £100 to £125 per attendee per day. That pays for the venue space, any connectivity that's needed, catering. As I say, it's a lot more expensive to do in London than it is in Belfast, for example, and places like Manchester and Leeds are in between there. And then there's a whole bunch of other things, paying for badges, connectivity, travel, miscellaneous expenses. That takes real time of real people, so the board has agreed a policy that where people are working a significant number of hours for UKNOF, we reimburse that at a fairly nominal rate. We don't pay necessarily every last hour. We pay that when UKNOF is in a position to be able to afford that. And we're raising most of this money through sponsorship and also occasionally late registrations or donations. The accounts are transparent. We will be presenting them at the AGM, and if you're interested, they're always available on request. Sponsor scheme, there's various different levels in there. I'm not going to go into all the details. They're on the wiki. If you're interested in sponsoring, speak to Denesh. I'll be very happy to explain them to you and explore commitments and benefits that would work for you. There is quite a lot of different levels, and they're paying for things, and it's making it happen. Worth explaining our governance model a little bit. It's about keeping things stable and transparent and accountable, but without overthinking or creating a structure with too much overhead. I think something that's easy to lose sight of is that we're not running monopoly mission critical national or international internet infrastructure here. We're not running an internet exchange or a CCTLD or number registry or a trade association even. So we don't need to overthink this. The way that we've set up accountability is that we have a bunch of non-profit internet organisations that contribute to UKNOF's operation and policy in some way, and that these are organisations that are accountable to the community already. And what we've done is we've set up for over a year now an advisory committee where these organisations appoint an individual representative, and appointment there is by invitation. Legal entity, back in 2005, something called UKNOF Limited was set up as a public company limited by guarantee. It originally was going to do a bunch of trade association forums. It finished up the UKNOF Secretariat was the main thing that it did. And mostly what it's doing is bookkeeping, invoicing, hold bank accounts. But essentially we merged the two into each other. UKNOF is UKNOF Limited and vice versa for all effective purposes. Here's the board. If the board members in the room could please stand up, you can match the faces to the names to the photographs. Okay, we have Nat and Denesh and Mike. Nigel is unfortunately called away in ripe NCC business. Willie and Steve will be at the AGM on Thursday in London. What does the board do? Appoints and removes committee members, signs off on finances, has to be natural persons, and has the usual fiduciary duties. And 1/3 of the board down must step down for reappointment at AGM each year. How does the advisory committee work? We're not asking for resources from them in terms of cash. Some of them helped us in the past with bootstrapping things, but really it's about time to perform oversight. And every so often, well, why don't we have individual membership like NANOG or OpenIX or something like that, where individuals pay for a subscription? We've never really concluded that the demand or need for that has justified the overhead of doing so. So we're sticking with what we have for now, but we certainly keep that question under review. We think we have effective accountability. But if you think that it's not effective or you have questions or concern, please speak to the Advisory Council representatives, because I am sure that you're a subscriber to more than one of their organisations. Who is the Advisory Committee? Again, if the Advisory Committee members in the room could stand up, please. So we have John, Andy, Rob, Will, Brandon, and Stephen and Joachim will be, as far as I know, attending the AGM. Thank you, and thank you for your support. We could add to this. There are certainly other suspect organisations if they became interested, but really they're there to review the accounts and to provide oversight to the board. Programme committee, there's a lot more of them. Again, there's some overlap. Programme committee is the lifeblood in terms of providing content. We're always looking for new content. We have a pretty good process for digesting and reviewing and promoting that content. Please speak to any of the programme committee members. Yes, that's the URL for the call for presentations for UKNOF30. It's not live yet, but it will be tomorrow. The deadline is going to be the 31st of October. We're setting it quite early before the holiday period and we lose everyone's attention. So get your abstracts in or you will turn into a pumpkin. Anyway, one more time, PC members, if the PC members in the room could stand up. As you can see, there's lots more of them because that's the interesting work. We have two new PC members that I'd like to welcome. Charlie Bosser from Fluency in Edinburgh has agreed to become a member, and David Farrell, who already helped us with the programme for this meeting, is agreed to continue on serving on the programme committee. Another committee. We haven't got a committee yet, but the meeting committee is basically the people who help out on a regular basis in a way which is critical to making the meetings happen. One of the reasons we wanted to establish this is that we wanted to reduce the overlap of people between the various committees and the board. And it's important that when we have sponsor presentations, they're there because the sponsor paid for them. And when we have other presentations, they're there because they're appropriate quality. Obviously, we will help the sponsor tailor their presentation to be receptive to the audience, but it's very important to keep these separate. You need to know when you're watching the commercial break and when you're watching the actual content. And by keeping the considerations and interests of the sponsors to some extent separated at one step from the actual program content, that is how we keep the quality of the program content out and not turn it into a message from our sponsors or product placement during the actual presentation. And we also have a lot of people who help out on an individual basis, and the meeting committee there is there to help out. I'm not going to ask people to stand up because everybody who's on the meeting committee has already stood up or isn't here. But you know, we get a lot of people. In particular, Chris and Debbie help out a lot. They haven't been able to make it to Belfast this time, but they do a huge amount. And then there's volunteers. If you want to help out a UKNOF meeting, we have a volunteers list. It's, if you think about, well, I would like to help out a UKNOF, but I can't quite figure out whether I'm any good for any of these committees, the volunteers list is a great way to start. There's no obligation, but when there are specific things that we need help with, like we still need somebody to do the PGP signing at this meeting, then the requests go out on the volunteers list. Again, you know, I'd just like to say thank you to all the people that help us, and particularly also our speakers. Our speakers come here on their own time and expense. And there would be no meeting without our speakers. So I just want to say one more thing. There's a movement within the community, I think, to make sure that diversity is protected and that nobody feels uncomfortable at a meeting or that there is no inappropriate behaviour. So RIPE has published a policy of that, and I'd just like to make sure that everyone understands that UKNOF supports that policy, and if you think that the experience you're having at a meeting is not the experience that you would like, due to the behaviour of others, then we would like to hear about it so we can do something about it. So, next meetings. As you're all aware, the Right meeting is coming back to the UK for the first time in, oh my God, about 16 years since we did one in Edinburgh back in 98. Oh, sorry, there was the Manchester one. Yeah, that was still quite a long time ago as well. As if London hasn't had international internet meeting fatigue this year, it's going to finish off as RIPE 69. We've decided what we're going to do for RIPE 69 is we're going to run an off-BOF. So what we will do is contribute a bit of content on things that have worked for running UKNOF in the hope that that will help people running other national NOGs. Okay, I lost a slide in here somewhere. Hopefully the other national NOGs, some of whom have been approaching us for help. We had somebody saying, can we use your Indico instance for one of our meetings, which only happens once a year. So we're hoping to basically spread some best practice. This hasn't been formally accepted by the RIPE Programme Committee yet, but my understanding is there's a good chance it's going to happen. UKNOF30 will be in London. Okay, sorry, I made a mistake in this slide. Bishopsgate is where UKNOF30 is, it's not where RIPE 69 is. That will be on the 22nd of January. That's a big new shiny venue. We're going to need to raise lots of sponsor money to have that, so if you're interested in sponsor, I expect we'll have a very large audience at that meeting. We're back in Manchester Central in April. That was a great meeting for last year. UKNOF29, we're looking at a number of possibilities. Sheffield and Newcastle are high on the list for September. If that's something that particularly interests you or you have other proposals for where you'd like to see UKNOF meeting, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, here's the other slide where I haven't got out of order. So what have we achieved recently? As I say, last meeting in Reading, 280 attendees. I think that the development strategy that we came out has been really quite successful from a clue outreach point of view. The meeting committee is pretty well established. Another thing that I've been pleased to see is that sometimes Indico is a pain in the butt to work with, but something that it's really good at is rating, doing shared reviews of and adding quantitative ratings to the material that we come in and having a process where we can get a bunch of submissions in, we can decide which are the good ones, which are the bad ones, which are the ones that would be good if we can just iterate it a little bit with sending some advice to the submitter and figuring out, setting a threshold for here's the minimum quality we're prepared to accept, here's how much time we have, and that's actually working quite well now. As I say, we've brought some new blood into the programme committee. Other country code national NOGs have been asking for help, and this is also our first multi-day meeting experiment where we've actually split the UKNOF meeting over more than one day. Obviously we're doing that in conjunction with ION. We'd be quite interested to hear from you, whether you think this works, whether longer UKNOF meetings might be something, or whether you prefer the simplicity of a one-day meeting. Anyway, loads of contact detail. There's all the various committees. You know who all the usual suspects are running things. Very happy to talk to you privately, or indeed to take any questions now. And I'll find out what people have been saying about me in the IRC room. Any questions? Oh, sorry. A reminder, when you go up to the mic, please identify yourself and your affiliation.
Brian Nisbet from HGANet. So I'm very glad to see the code of conduct mentioned, or whatever one wants to call it. And obviously I have a vested interest in pushing that. But what I'm wondering is, it's great to see the link to the RIPE version of it, but is it your intent to put a UKNOF branded version of that? So rather than just the link to the RIPE meeting site, even if it's the same words on the UKNOF
We'll be discussing
website.
that at the AGM on Thursday.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'd just like to finish off by saying thank you, a round of appreciation for all the people that help out and make UKNOF possible.